The first time the sparks flew, they felt like a storm breaking open my life, bright and violent and impossible to ignore. And in that sudden blaze, I learned how quickly a single moment can split the world into before and after. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and quiet miracles that show up when life feels hardest, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel so more stories like this can reach hearts that are still waiting to heal. My name is Michael Harper, and this story unfolded in a worn industrial corner of Ohio, where old brick factories lean into the wind like tired men who once carried the weight of the world. I had grown up there, raised on the sound of machines and the smell of oil, believing that honest work would always be enough. For years I welded frames in a plant outside Toledo, hands steady, back strong, pride quiet but solid. Then the layoffs came like a winter that refused to end. One by one, lockers emptied, laughter disappeared, and the gate shut behind us. I told myself it was temporary, but bills did not care about hope. My father had taught me that a man stands tall even when the ground shakes. Yet I found myself bending under the weight of overdue notices and a silence at home that felt louder than any factory floor. I took whatever work I could find, bouncing between temporary jobs, patching together days and nights, pretending it did not hurt to be starting over at 40. That was how I ended up at a small fabrication shop in a town called Maro Creek, a place with more rust than paint and more stories than money. The owner, Thomas Reed, was a broad-shouldered man with a tired kindness in his eyes. He did not ask many questions, just handed me gloves and pointed to a station. The shop hummed with heat and effort, a chorus of grinders and torches, and for the first time in months I felt useful again. Still, something inside me was frayed. I carried a quiet bitterness, a sense that life had moved on without asking my permission. I worked hard, kept my head down, and avoided eye contact, convinced that expectations only led to disappointment. That was when I noticed her. At first she was just another welder behind a curtain of sparks, small in frame, moving with a confidence that made the metal obey. I assumed she was young, maybe new, maybe passing through. I did not look too closely. It was easier not to. Days passed, measured in seams and beads, in sweat and the smell of hot steel. Then one afternoon, as the sun slanted through high windows and dust floated like quiet prayers, the moment arrived. The arc flared brighter than usual, a brief explosion of light that drew my eyes despite myself. When the sparks settled, she lifted her welding mask, and time did something strange. My chest tightened, not with desire alone, but with recognition of something gentle and strong at the same time. Her face was smudged with honest work, her eyes steady and warm, and the contrast between the harshness of the sparks and the calm she carried felt unreal. The thought crossed my mind, fully formed and uninvited, that I did not expect an angel behind the sparks. Her name was Grace Miller, and learning it felt like learning a truth that had been waiting. She had grown up not far from Maro Creek, the daughter of a mechanic and a Sunday school teacher, raised to believe that skill and compassion were not opposites. Welding had been her way out and her way back, a craft she respected and mastered. She worked with a quiet focus, never showing off, never shrinking either. Watching her made me ashamed of how small I had allowed myself to become. The challenge was not the work. It was the way my guarded heart reacted to her presence. I found myself caring again, about details, about doing things right, about showing up fully. That terrified me. Caring meant risk. I had lost enough to know how easily things slipped away. I told myself to keep it professional, to stay in my lane, to remember that people came and went. But Grace did not treat people like temporary fixtures. She listened. She noticed when hands shook from fatigue or when someone needed an extra minute. In a place where toughness was currency, she paid in patience. Outside the shop, my life was still a mess. My savings were thin, my truck coughed more than it ran, and my pride took hits every time I asked for an extension. I spent evenings in a small rented room staring at the ceiling, replaying old choices, wondering where faith went when it slipped out of your hands. Sundays came and went. I stopped attending church, telling myself God understood. Yet something about Grace stirred memories of hymns and potlucks, of believing that love was an action, not a reward. The turning point came the day Thomas called me into his office. The shop was struggling, contracts were drying up, and cuts were coming. I braced myself for another ending, Instead, Thomas spoke of opportunity, of a chance to bid on a larger project that could keep the lights on. It would require trust, teamwork, and someone to lead a small crew. He looked at me with a question he did not voice. Fear rose like a tide. Leadership meant visibility, and visibility meant the possibility of failure. I almost said no, almost. Grace was part of the crew. Over long hours we worked side by side, pushing through setbacks, learning each other's rhythms. There were moments of frustration, of mistakes that cost time and money, moments when my old doubts clawed back. Each time Grace responded not with blame but with resolve. She believed solutions existed even when evidence was thin. Slowly, against my own resistance, I began to believe it too. As the project took shape, so did something else. Not a romance wrapped in fireworks, but a respect that deepened into affection, built on shared effort and quiet support. She never asked about my past losses, never pried. She simply stood present, steady as a welded joint done right. In her presence, I remembered who I was before fear took the wheel. The project succeeded. The shop breathed again. Jobs were saved. Thomas shook my hand with gratitude that felt heavier than praise. I went home that night and slept without the weight on my chest for the first time in years. On Sunday, I found myself back in a pew, listening to a hymn about grace that felt newly personal. I realized that redemption did not always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it showed up in safety goggles and steel-toed boots, lifting a mask in the middle of an ordinary day. Life did not become perfect. Challenges remained, but something essential had shifted. I stood taller, not because everything was fixed, but because I was no longer hiding. Grace and I continued working together, our connection deepening at a pace that respected the work and the world around us. She reminded me that strength could be gentle, that faith could be practical, that angels did not always have wings. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of a moment when hope surprised you in an unexpected place, please take a moment now to like the video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to the channel so these stories can keep finding their way into the world. Before this story ends, I have one special request for you. Please comment below and share where you found your own unexpected spark, because your words might be the light someone else is waiting to see. Today, when I think back to that first burst of sparks in Maro Creek, I understand that miracles often wear work clothes. They ask us to show up, to risk caring, to believe that even after loss, something beautiful can still be forged. And every time I see Grace lift her welding mask, I am reminded that angels do not always descend from the sky. Sometimes they rise from the workbench, steady and real, teaching us how to mend what we thought was beyond repair.